Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Carl Brook, and I am Managing Director of the International Network for Environmental Compliance and Enforcement, or INES. This is the fourth webinar in a series on performance measurement in compliance and enforcement. This webinar is focusing specifically on next generation compliance techniques. We're lucky to have with us today two gentlemen from US EPA. Here is Ed Messina. He is the Director of Monitoring, Assistance, and Media Programs in the Office of Compliance at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And this is Jon Silberman, who is a Senior Attorney Advisor at US EPA. They've worked to develop the EPA's Next Generation Compliance Enforcement Program, and they'll be discussing aspects of performance measurement with respect to that. Following the discussion, we will open up the floor for comments and questions. Before we jump in, I'd like to just give people a brief chance to introduce themselves online. We'll unmute people for the moment, and starting with Daniel Klaus. Are you there? Okay, Greta Najkler. Greta, could you introduce yourself, please? Okay, my name is Greta, and I am not able to talk, but I am from the Ontario government. Okay, my name is Greta. I'm not able to talk, but I am from the Ontario government. Lawrence Baschak.
Good morning. Lawrence Baschak with Ministry of Environment, Government of Saskatchewan, and we have four others joining as well.
Diana Tumbalo.
Krista Simeon, Strategic Analyst.
Jeff Drunewski, Environment Protection Officer.
Thank you. Mark Peixo. Mark Peixo, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. It's Inspector Mark Peixo, Government of Saskatchewan, Ministry of Environment.
Welcome. Next is Nabil Haq. Nabil, are you there? Okay. The next person is Noman Kader. Noman, are you there? Rhonda Michaels.
She hasn't connected with her audio.
Okay, so it looks like Rhonda is not connected with her audio yet. Tanya Shajanian.
Hi, it's Tanya. I'm an intern at ELI.
Timothy Nicholson. Vicky Gauthier. Vicky, are you there? Okay. Well then, I expect some other people to continue to join, but in the meantime, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ed and to Jon.
Great. I'm going to kick it off, and thank you, Carl, for the invite to speak to this group, and welcome our friends from Canada. Jon and I are going to talk about the agency's efforts to address compliance with environmental regulations. And the approach that we're going to talk about, which is next-gen compliance, represents a bit of a paradigm shift from how EPA had traditionally set about understanding compliance and driving compliance. And so, one of the issues that we were faced with was, in a world of declining resources, where we may not have the resources to go out and inspect individual facilities, how can we better ensure compliance from the get-go with our regulations and permits? So next generation compliance is 5 individual pieces that are interrelated that are leveraging technology and new approaches to improve compliance without necessarily the need to have a physical on-site inspection, although that is still an important aspect of a well-run compliance program. So the 5 components, which I'm going to briefly highlight for you, and then we have Jon presenting some very real-world specific examples of what each of these components are, and then also what are the challenges and what has been sort of the measurement of success with regard to these individual components, and then hopefully that'll engender a discussion around each of these elements. So the first aspect at the top is regulation and permit design. So how do we design regulations up front that incorporate and drive better compliance? And so if you think about the easiest example, which is, how do you drive speeds down in certain areas where you've got a speed limit? One approach is to have a police officer there with a radar gun measuring the speed of everyone. Another is sort of the speed bump analogy, where there's a physical structure that points people to better compliance, and you have speed bumps in these areas where you're driving individuals to just sort of naturally comply with the law. And we've got a number of examples of what that means in the environmental context. Advanced monitoring, we've invested a significant amount of resources in trying to develop advanced monitoring, provide advanced monitoring technologies to the states, and equip our own inspectors with advanced monitoring. We've got some examples of what this looks like, and it's the miniaturization of technology. The increased computing power enables us to have technologies that are able to see pollution, basically where we didn't otherwise know was out there using our traditional monitoring methods. And so when you've got a better window into what's happening environmentally, you're able to apply your resources in a better manner. Electronic reporting, we've passed several regulations that now require facilities to provide electronic reporting of their monitoring. This helps us better utilize the data and manage it. And then transparency, coupled with transparency, is taking that environmental data, making it available to the public, making it available to our co-regulators in the states to understand where the environmental problems may be and focus our resources there. And then innovative enforcement is taking these components and where we have violations that we have found with facilities, how can we incorporate these various aspects, better, clearer language, using advanced technologies, incorporating electronic reporting, increasing transparency into the settlements that we have. And so with that, I'm going to kick it off to Jon, who's going to talk a little bit about the technological aspects. I think before I do that, one quick point is each one of these parts, I think, presents challenges with regard to performance measurement and how we're doing, and some of them actually lend themselves, I think, to demonstrating success. And so as we go through the slides, we're going to talk a little bit about what those differences might be. So with that, I'll kick it off to Jon.
In today's presentation, we're going to focus on paradigm changes in 2 areas. One is how we monitor for compliance, and the second is why we monitor for compliance. For how we monitor compliance, we're going to talk about different ways of emissions and pollutant monitoring and the new tools and technologies that help us do it more effectively. For information technology, we'll talk about those as well, e-reporting, SONs or buoys that have telemetry and automatically upload ambient water monitoring data. And we'll have many examples. And as I present each of the examples, we'll talk about the why part of the paradigm shift, which is critically important because in the old days, we primarily monitored compliance to determine if people were in compliance with the monitoring results either used to not take action or to take an enforcement action. That may have worked in the days that Ed described in the past when we had more resources and fewer regulated entities and fewer regulatory obligations to monitor. But today, in the US, we have over 40 million regulated entities. We have about 110,000 state and federal inspections combined, and we just can't do it the same old way that we've done it in the past. We have to do it differently. And so the technologies that we use, and as I present the examples that follow, I'll describe how these principles apply to each of them. Make invisible pollution visible so that we can inform the government, industry, and the public. Both industry, EPA, and communities can use the information to identify new opportunities to reduce and prevent pollution, and very critically, to not just respond to noncompliance, but identify deficiencies and correct them before they become violations, because that's a win-win for everyone, including health and the environment. And we'll talk about how to drive compliance through transparency and accountability. And then lastly, and very importantly, how, and the examples will show this, that we can use this advanced technology to change our dialogue with the regulated community and with the communities we're protecting. So on this slide, you see on the left a picture of a GMAP mobile sensor. That car has technology attached to it that measures levels of certain pollutants. It also has a compact weather station to look at wind speed, direction, temperature. And this vehicle also has the ability to upload what it finds automatically to the internet or to EPA or public websites. We'll get back to that in a moment. On the right, you have an infrared camera. You have a picture of a person using it to look at pipes, valves, flanges. And we will see a video of how that works, and I'll explain when we look at the video how powerful that tool can be, both at a facility level, and we'll look at the city of Houston and how they addressed their smog issues using those cameras. Okay, if you take that GMAP vehicle and you drive it along a boundary between two facilities, what the mapping will produce is a graph that looks like what you're looking at now. And where you have the red, you have spikes of benzene emissions. The yellow are high levels, orange is even higher, green are safe levels. And keeping in mind that the equipment on the GMAP vehicle also provides you the ability to determine what direction the pollutants are coming from. This was a situation in real life where the two facilities were arguing with each other and with EPA or the state as to which facility was responsible for the benzene problem. And rather than get stuck at arguing about that, we drove the GMAP vehicle between the two facilities. We produced these outcomes. We determined it was the top facility with most of the tanks that was producing the pollution problem. We presented them with the information. We made their pollution that was invisible to them and others visible this way. And we changed the dialogue from, we didn't do it, why are you bothering us, to, yes, we do have a problem, how can we work together to fix the problem? Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to see a video in a moment, but what I want to mention at the outset is the tank on the left is subject to the Hazardous Organic NESHAP rule, Clean Air Act rule. It contains benzene, other tanks on the farm contain toluene, and very importantly, what's in that tank is not pollution. What's in that tank is product, and it's valuable. And if the company was able to visualize, to have it be visible, what was leaking out of this tank that you're going to see in a moment, they would never have allowed it to occur. It's lost profit. So let's take a look at the video, and we'll see first what you see with the naked eye, and then we'll see what the infrared camera shows you.
Right on the picture.
That's the, yeah, that's what you want to click on. No, back up, and yeah, there you go. We're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. This is why I asked Emmett to please do the slides. This is the only video, by the way, for the folks on the phone. If we were giving you a longer presentation, you'd have more. There you go. All right, so this is what you see with the naked eye. This is one of our EPA inspectors at the facility. And this is what you see with the infrared camera. Now keep in mind that what's billowing out on the top there is a known human carcinogen, benzene. And this person's being exposed to it, and you can just imagine EPA's inspectors standing with the people from the facility on the ground looking up at this. And from what I was told, the facility people were horrified because they thought they were doing the right thing. They never dreamed that they had this kind of problem. And it turned out to be a flange issue where they replaced it, they eliminated the problem. And that's another important lesson. This technology allows you to identify problems that don't always necessarily require the huge outlay of expenses to fix. In this case, it was a simple fix, but how do you fix it if it's invisible? And let's see, how are we doing on the slides?
We're good.
I think you have to go into view
Yeah.
and go to
Slideshow.
slideshow.
Play from across left. Slideshow top.
Presentation view.
One
Go
bar
to
the right.
Oh, yeah, yes.
and then current slide.
Yes.
Okay, before we move on from this slide, and I'll repeat this in another example. This is one tank on a farm with many tanks, and this is one tank farm in a country with thousands of tank farms. So if you extrapolate that pollution that's coming out of that facility there, and us being able to identify it and fix it and stop it with the infrared camera, and you extrapolate that nationwide, you begin to get a feel for the strength of this technology. Next slide, please. Okay. On the bottom, you have a link to a National Public Radio story that goes into great detail about what this slide is about. But for now, I'm just going to be very brief and say that the city of Houston, which for years had the worst smog problem in the United States due to volatile organic chemicals mixing with low-level ozone, and you can see the smog in the background in this picture. After trying many different strategies, the state took some infrared cameras, put it on a helicopter, flew over the city, took some pictures and movies, finding that which tanks were leaking and the barges that were leaking that were bringing the VOCs into the city, the volatile organic chemicals. And because of that, they were able to approach the facilities and say, you may or may not be aware of this, but here's something you should see. And they made the pollution visible. The chemical companies were also concerned, both for health and safety reasons, but also for lost profit of what they were losing in the way of their chemicals. They bought their own cameras, and in 2009, the city of Houston was returned to attainment under the Clean Air Act for smog, which was an amazing success story that would not have been possible without this technology. Okay, on this slide, these are, by the way, none of these are hypotheticals. Everything I'm showing you are real-life, actual examples. On the left, you have a chart from Marathon Petroleum Company's facility. On the right, you have a chart from the BP Whiting Refinery. We'll see what the settlement for that case looked like in a slide to come in a moment. But what this slide shows is the difference between estimating and the difference between knowing when you have an advanced monitoring technology that can tell you what's actually being emitted from a flare. So the blue level are the levels that the companies estimated that their flares were emitting, and based on engineering estimates primarily, and that they reported to EPA as their emissions. On the right, you see what EPA found were the actual emissions using Fourier transform infrared monitoring technology. And there were orders of magnitude greater emissions. And with this technology, the company was able to get a handle on the problem, both of them, and lower their emissions. And this is another example of, these are two companies, they have many facilities, they have lots of flares, and then there are a whole bunch of other companies across the United States that have all kinds of flares too. And so when you extrapolate from the results that you're seeing on this slide nationwide, again, we really get a feel for how powerful this technology can be as a game changer and a paradigm shifter for improving health and the environment. On this slide, this is a study that was led by Michael Greenstone, formerly of Harvard University, now the University of Chicago, looking at the operation of a third-party compliance verification program in Gujarat, India. When you look on the left of the slide for suspended particulate matter, you see actual measurements of emissions, and on the top you see what the facilities were reporting to the Indian government that their emissions were when they were subject to a very weak third-party compliance verification program lacking true independence criteria for the verifiers. On the bottom, you see the change in what was reported when the third-party compliance verification program was enhanced with strong independence criteria to ensure that the people who are doing the verification are truly independent from the facilities. And it's a long story, all the changes that were made. One of them, for example, was that they were paid from a central pool rather than being paid directly from the facilities they looked at. They were also assigned from a central pool. What's fascinating about this chart, and here we have some, again, real actual measurements to back up what we're seeing. On the top chart, you have an example of what we call strategic misreporting. The facilities are, for the most part, clustered right below the threshold for what would be a regulatory violation in that jurisdiction. On the bottom, when you have true reporting that's now being verified by really independent people, you have more like a classic bell-shaped curve that you might expect to see in this situation. What I always find fascinating about this slide is that if you look at the top, as many of the facilities were misreporting that they had greater emissions than were misreporting that they had fewer emissions, because strategic misreporting is all about giving the regulator what you think they expect. And they thought if we show that we're really, really efficient, they won't believe us. With the bottom bell-shaped curve, we can do so much more with that from a program management perspective. We can target the worst facilities more effectively, but we can also go back to the ones that are doing their jobs correctly and then look at their best management practices and look at their technologies and learn from them about things that we can then transfer to the laggards. So EPA is using independent third-party verification more frequently, or at least we have been lately. On the right, you have a couple of rules that have independent third-party verification provisions. And you also have an example of a couple of enforcement settlements that have really strong independent third-party verification. For the enforcement settlements, we'll get to a later slide where we'll give you a link to a website where we have summaries of 66 settlements with strong next-gen compliance provisions that will include these two. Okay, so we looked earlier at BP Whiting, and we looked at how when they used engineering estimates, they were reporting far lower emissions than when we used Fourier infrared technology to determine what they were actually emitting. In the settlement for this case, it included an $8 million penalty and a requirement for BP Whiting nationwide to invest $400 million in injunctive relief to correct their violations. But that's not what the really exciting part of the settlement is from a next-gen perspective, because they also had what we call a supplemental environmental project, where they had to install fence line monitors, and the installation sites were chosen in consultation with EPA and their local community. Fence line monitoring is, as the word describes, not stack monitoring of what's coming out of a particular smokestack, nor is it ambient monitoring of what's generally in the air in the community. But it's right at the fence line of the facility, and it tells you the combined stack emissions and fugitive emissions that are coming off of the facility. This is really important to communities because imagine you're living next door. You don't really care if the benzene you're breathing comes from a stack or from a pipe as a fugitive emission. You care about what you're putting in your lungs. So this measurement is a way of measuring everything that's crossing the facility boundary. So it's a powerful measure. And the settlement requires the company to post the data weekly that they generate through the fence line monitors. And then upon request of the community, they have to review the data with the community. And the community has people that are monitoring this all the time to ensure that the company meets its obligations under the consent decree. And as you can expect, this helps drive better compliance through transparency and accountability and community involvement. This approach also eventually became incorporated into EPA's refinery MAC rule, which is an excellent example of how a technology that's first tested through a supplemental environmental project in an enforcement settlement and proven to be effective can then be spread out more widely, generally to the regulated community through a rule. So on the next slide, this is what you will see if you go to BP's site and click on the public website for the fence line monitoring results. And the paths that you see there in the sites are where the monitors are located. And if you're a member of the public, we can all do this if we want to. You can go back and use the website at the bottom of the slide and Google it yourself when you're done if you're curious. And then you'll find out in real time or close to it what the monitoring results are for this facility now.
And one good point to make here is that there is interest with facilities in having this fence line monitoring, particularly where they can measure pollutants that are coming upwind of the facility and downwind of the facility. So in many cases in the Houston project, there were facilities that were indicating that the pollution that you're seeing at one end of the fence isn't necessarily pollution that we're causing. It's pollution that's being passed through the facility. And so there is interest, as you can see where these monitors are placed, of having a general upwind and downwind two-pack monitoring system, so that the facilities really have their own interests too in putting these monitors up, in addition to telling the community what emissions are coming off their facility.
Okay, next slide, please. All right, here's the rule I talked about, where the fence line monitoring, which for those who are into this sort of thing are passive benzene diffusion tubes, which are mounted on a wall or a fence, and for 2 weeks they absorb all of the benzene that's floating off from the facility, and then they're analyzed, and you can average it. This fence line, this rule requires certain refineries to have this type of fence line monitoring, and it also includes some additional next-gen compliance elements. One of which that's exceptionally important is that in the rule, there's a trigger for the company to do a root cause analysis of why its benzene levels are rising above the trigger level, and then take corrective steps and report on it to reduce emissions. This trigger level, as I mentioned with the first slide that I talked about, where we talked about the why of the paradigm shift of why we do monitoring differently now. This trigger is not non-compliance. This trigger is a deficiency that, if it continues, will lead to non-compliance, with the trigger kicking in root cause analysis and corrective action on the part of the facility so it can address the problem before it becomes non-compliant. And that's a much better approach for everyone. This rule also has additional next-gen elements, so if you're curious about it, you can look it up on EPA's website, but for now, we'll just focus on these. What you see here is it's called a sonde. It's sort of a buoy. EPA region, we got to go back. There we go. EPA Region 1 owns it. This one is in the Charles River in Boston, Massachusetts. And this sonde takes measurements of the ambient water quality in the water every 15 minutes. It covers multiple parameters. They include temperature, conductivity, pH, dissolved oxygen, and also cyanobacteria, which is a harmful element of algae blooms, which are a concern in this waterway. And it's uploaded automatically to a public website that, if you click on the links below for the two rivers where they are now, you can find out in real time, well, real time being within 15 minutes, what the water quality is where you live. This is not necessarily a type of monitoring technique now that you would use to determine who you would target for an enforcement action for water quality violations on an individual facility basis. But to show you how the technology is changing, EPA right now is working in our Office of Research and Development on technology that can analyze the nature of the bacteria that is tested and that's found in the waterways. And we're already at the point where we can probably distinguish between whether the bacteria, if you're dealing with CAFOs, comes from a poultry plant or a beef plant or whatnot. And the way technology is evolving, we're going to reach the point where you may be able to get an individual signature in the future on a particular facility based on the ambient water monitoring. When that happens, that'll also be a real game changer. Ed, did you want to add anything on this one?
No, I think you covered it.
That's the one thing. Now, monitoring is effective per se, but it's effective, exceptionally effective when you use it together with transparency, of which we've had several examples that we've looked at already. Since we are talking about measurement, I thought I would present two scenarios where we have measured the results of transparency-based approaches to cleaner water. On the left, you have a research project that was done when the Safe Drinking Water Act was amended in the late 90s to require consumer confidence reports that report on the water quality and any violations to be mailed to homeowners. In this study in Massachusetts, and this was a statistically strong, evidence-based study, the researchers found that a very significant reduction in water quality violations when the requirement kicked in to mail these reports to consumers. And I don't think it's going to be difficult to figure out why that happened, because the last thing you want to do if you're a drinking water supplier is notify the people you're giving drinking water to that it's not safe. So when this is an example of taking something that had previously been really not transparent because the reports were going only to the regulators, and sometimes they weren't acted on for a while. Now they go directly to the consumers of the product, and that drives improved compliance. On the right, you have a study that will be published in the next several months. It's just being finalized now. The state of Ohio changed their regulations to require that their NIPD's discharge outfall points for, these are facilities that have clean water, major facilities that have Clean Water Act permits, that where they have their discharge outfalls, that now they have to put a sign up like the one you see on the slide bottom right, so that people who are walking by the water body or river on a trail, or if they're swimming or fishing, that they will now be able to see that this is a place where there's a regulated Clean Water Act discharge outfall. The research question that we asked the researcher to check into was whether that actually led to reduced noncompliance. And very interestingly, under 3 different statistical models, the results all showed that there was a statistically significant decrease in noncompliance, but the results also showed that the bulk of those decreases were clustered in areas that tended to have higher education levels and other higher socioeconomic values, which is a very important consideration when we think about environmental justice and using these types of tools. Sometimes transparency approaches can have a different impact and be more or less effective depending on the community that receives the information and what their resources and ability are to react to it. So there's a time and place for everything under the sun, and there's a time and place for transparency, and there's a time and place for the old school approach of just lowering the discharge levels across the line in everyone's permits. And that's, we always take that into account in program design. This slide, I especially like the picture of the pigeon on the bottom left wearing one of these small new devices that monitors for particulates in the air. But this is an example of what we call the democratization of environmental monitoring. The paradigm shift is this. In the past, monitoring technology was big, bulky, expensive, hard to obtain. You had to have advanced degree to use it, and it tended to be in the possession of large companies and the regulators. The public didn't have it, small businesses didn't have it. We're now reaching the point where you have that top picture on the top left, and that blue device is the air beam particulate matter. It's synced through Bluetooth to the cell phone, and then the person who gets the readings in his or her neighborhood then uploads it to the national or database. In this case, it's actually a city in the Netherlands for this particular video. And then you get a picture across the city of what the levels are of the particulates, and that can be used by the government and communities to make health decisions like whether you should run lawnmowers that day, or it's a good day for jogging, or whether they might want to take a further look at target a facility near the increases to see why that's happening. If I was litigating a case and I wanted to have somebody present evidence on the monitoring technology, I would have to qualify the witness. I'd have to show that they're technically qualified. I'd have to show that the equipment is useful for the purpose and that it's calibrated and all these different things. What happens when thousands or millions of people start using this type of monitoring technology and are sending the information to governments, or they're using it to contact politicians or whatnot? These are some of the issues that we'll need to look into in the future, and this is a presentation in and of itself, but I just wanted to raise the issues, for consideration. Okay, next slide. Electronic reporting to government is not just emailing files to EPA or a state. It's a two-way communication process using smart tools and electronically valid signatures, where if we do it right, like the example many of us are aware of where we prepare our tax returns using TurboTax or some type of technology. You can build in compliance assistance and other forms of two-way communication. So Ed mentioned that we had a rule come out, he did right, for the NIPT reporting rule. So you might ask, does e-reporting actually lead to better compliance? And so the chart you see on the right is a study in Ohio of compliance related to the adoption of e-reporting. Ohio was an early adopter of e-reporting. And to make a long story short, you can see that as the red line approaches 100%, the number of reported violations are going down as the use of e-reporting goes up. And again, we probably don't have to hypothesize too hard that when people put something in an envelope and mail it to a state or EPA, and in the past they've been used to it sitting around for a while, and now they have a new circumstance where they actually have to hit the send button and they know that it's being received and analyzed quickly electronically. They might take more care to make sure that they're actually in compliance. This is EPA's Enforcement and Compliance History Online system called ECHO. There's a URL on the bottom. And again, this could also be an hour presentation, but I'm really putting this on here for folks to go and take a look at it afterwards if you have an interest, at a different time. But this is where EPA puts all of the publicly available compliance history for sectors and facilities online, and built into this tool are all different kinds of standard searches and the ability to do more complex searches. So if you click on the main page, the first thing you could do, if you were interested, is just type in your zip code. You'll come up with every EPA regulated facility that's in the system. And then you click on the facilities on the map, and you can find out when they were inspected, what the inspection outcomes were, if they led to enforcement, and whatnot. And so this is another effort to use transparency and compliance data to drive better compliance and performance.
I think as John mentioned too, electronic reporting isn't just a one-way. There's two-way communication with the facilities, and you need the enterprise architecture behind the electronic reporting to, once you're receiving this data, make sense of it, either through data visualization, using geomaps, geotagging, and this website is a really great tool to take all of the environmental data that we're receiving, emissions reporting, inspection numbers, and create dashboards and charts and trends so the public can understand the data in a more easily and sort of readily accessible fashion. So electronic reporting, as John mentioned, isn't just about sort of getting the data in. It's sort of how do you receive the data, how do you manipulate it, and how do you use it to have an efficiently run program.
And I know we're a little over time, so we're going to finish up pretty quickly and then get to the questions. But next slide, we talk about innovative enforcement. We've already looked at some settlements and some of the innovative features that they have, next-gen tools and approaches. We also will show you an example now of enhanced targeting approaches. On the bottom is a URL that if you click on it, you'll get to our summary of 66 settlements that identifies specifically what the next-gen components are in the settlements. And it's quite a fascinating list, but if we go to the next page,
And so similarly, with regard to the drinking water consumer reports, internally as a management tool, EPA looked at drinking water violations. We have a fairly robust system of reporting where facilities and public water systems that are above the maximum contaminant level, we get those reports from the states. And we developed a targeting strategy around the number and type of MCL violation, how long that violation was outstanding, and we developed an algorithm to assign points to particular water systems to, in essence, sort of grade their compliance or non-compliance. And so what you see on the left here is when we started this in 2010, the number of systems that were scoring above what we thought would be serious violations. And just by the very posting of this data, just by the collection and data visualization techniques, not only with the public, but amongst the various regulators and our co-regulators in the states, by displaying this data, the number of serious violations for drinking water systems decreased substantially over time. And so I think this is a pretty good success story for U.S. drinking water and the number of violations that have been reduced over time. I think one footnote here is, I think anytime you take data that wasn't displayed and then start displaying it, some of that is going to be data cleanup in that, oh, okay, people are looking at this data, we want to make sure that the data is correct, whereas maybe there wasn't that incentive. So some of this trend line is, I think, ascribable to actual violation decreases, but some of this trend line is also, I think, you can ascribe to people paying more attention to the data and making sure that it's correct.
So again, a perfect example, if you take the compliance of a set or sector of facilities, you take information that previously was invisible to the public and you make it visible to them, and it actually, as you can see, improves compliance. And by the way, I don't know if anyone can see this, but this is if I were in Virginia and I wanted to see what the drinking water facilities were in my state, you just go to this website and you click on any of these Excel files every year, quarterly, and I could right now tell you, who the facilities of concern are. And if one of them is my drinking water facility, I think I would call up and report that I was unhappy with that. And that's how it's supposed to work. Next slide. This is just one of two examples that I'll have the next in a minute of what we would call our settlements of next-gen compliance elements. So this is in Puerto Rico, and this was a company that had a problem with leaking gasoline. And so the settlement required them, as part of the injunctive relief, to create an automatic electronic release detection monitoring system across all of their facilities. So 125 facilities where these probing sensors are now connected to audible and visible alarms that give information both to the individual gas stations and their people, but also to a central data monitoring system that the total petroleum company maintains for all of the 125 facilities. And this is an example of now you're making the releases visible, and you're leading to a situation where non-compliance, or even if it's not non-compliance, just problems with small pinhole leaks are found and corrected quickly before they become a major environmental problem. And that's another part of the paradigm shift of next-gen.
And on the same slide, another example, and I think this highlights the fact that these technologies are becoming ever more present. They are cheaper over time. They provide a really great window into how your system is operating. And so there was a large city in Texas that had a large number of sewer backups into people's homes. And they would send out their crews to take care of the plugging that would occur and sort of tamp down the pipes and address the problem after it happened. And they switched their paradigm, and they installed micro sensors in each one of their manholes with a 3G cell signal to a main facility. And all it did was measure the water level. So as they saw throughout their system the water level in a particular sewer area increasing, they would send out a crew to investigate whether that was caused by a plugging and whether that was going to lead to a backup. And so they reduced their actual sewage backups from the thousands down to the hundreds, and maybe just under 100, because of that proactive approach, utilizing technology, the miniaturization of that technology, and really just a simple level sensor that enabled them to manage their program in a different way they were able to demonstrate success and had a lot of happy folks over time because they were able to reduce the number of sewage backups in their city.
Yeah, another next-gen principle is where you can make compliance easier than non-compliance. So we had another settlement under the Marine Sanctuaries Act where garbage scows were dumping garbage in the ocean off of New York and New Jersey in places that they weren't supposed to. The settlement required them to put a device on the scows that literally, using GPS technology, prevented them from dumping the waste unless they were within the area where the waste dumping was permitted. It could be overridden in an emergency, you know, if things happen, but this just took the guesswork out of where you dump your garbage using advanced monitoring, advanced technologies. And so the final slide, for more information on the Next Generation Compliance Program, you can go to our main website. That's in the URL in the picture, or you can just Google EPA Next Generation Compliance, and there are all sorts of resources there. And below that are a pair of articles that I published or will publish recently with David Hinton, the Director of the Office of Compliance, that will give you a lot more examples of everything we've talked about today with all kinds of references and URLs and everything else. The first one is on designing more effective rules and permits, and the second one, which is forthcoming in May, is principles of effective environmental monitoring and reporting.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, John.